We've worked hard, banded together, fought for something, and made history many times. We've gotten this far because together we are tireless. Tireless doesn't mean we don't get tired. It means we help each other continue on. And knowing one voice is strong, but the power of thousands or millions is stronger. Tireless takes a stand together, and we won't rest until all of Canada is with us. We are the Tireless, and together we will achieve gender equality.
I just want to thank you for coming on International Women's Day and participating in this webinar to explore the conversation of corporate citizenship on gender equality. My name is Andrea Gunraj, and I am the VP of Public Engagement at the Canadian Women's Foundation. I just want to let you know that closed captioning is available for this event. You can see the links below to be able to turn that on. And I will also be dropping our participant package in the chat so that you have access to that, but you did get that ahead of time in the event package email that was sent out to you. Now, without further ado, we're just going to jump right into it. 30 years of gender equality gains are at risk in the pandemic, and the goal of building a gender equal Canada is more pressing than ever. Corporate Canada, of course, has an important role to play. We're going to focus on that today, building workplace cultures that are equal and practices that will build up strong corporate partnership for gender equality. We'll discuss unlocking the power of gender equality in business and in work, and key steps to incorporate citizenship, corporate citizenship for gender equality, and how your philanthropic efforts can transform lives and communities. A little bit of background: for 30 years, the Canadian Women's Foundation has been Canada's foundation for gender equality. We support women, girls, two-spirit, trans, and non-binary people to move out of violence, out of poverty, and into confidence and leadership. The work of the foundation and the programs we support takes place on traditional First Nations, Métis, and Inuit territories. We're really grateful to meet and work on this land, but we recognize that land acknowledgements are not enough. We need to pursue truth, reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship in an ongoing effort to make right with all our relations. Just a little bit of housekeeping: we have moderators in the background to ensure safe, respectful conversations, and we'll be answering questions in the Q&A box. So if you have Q&A questions, just go ahead and put them in the Q&A box to make sure we see them. And now I'm going to turn it over to the VP of Philanthropy at the Canadian Women's Foundation, Suzanne Duncan.
Hello. Hello and welcome. I want to thank each of you for joining us today. I know that everyone has so many pressing priorities right now, and I really appreciate that you've made the time to be part of this conversation on gender equality. This conversation matters today more than ever. I don't think I have to tell you that the pandemic has had a terrible impact on women, girls, and gender diverse people, and we need champions like you more than ever. Today, you're going to hear from a powerhouse of panelists who will provide insights and practical solutions so that businesses of every size can create gender equitable workplaces. And we're also going to talk about how employees at all levels can influence change. But before I get started, I want to thank all of our sponsors for making this event possible. We have our presenting sponsor, Abliminal, and our supporting sponsor, EY, as well as many other organizations who've made today happen. I also want to let you know that we have some amazing prizes today as just a bit of a bonus. Throughout the program, we're going to have a chance to win a deluxe gift basket from The Body Shop, one of our panelists, and also a wonderful jewelry package from Hillberg and Berk. Then we will have another great prize from our panelists at RBC and Catalyst, which is just on the next slide, that will allow you to choose from a 2-hour workplace workshop valued at $6,500. Throughout the program, I'm going to ask you some quick trivia quick trivia questions, pardon me. And the first person who types the right answer into the chat will win one of these great prizes. Today, we're going to talk about how corporate citizenship Today we're going to talk about how corporations and businesses of any size can they can combine their shared purpose and their effective business practices to improve their community and benefit their bottom line. There's going to be some terms that will come up today, and I've listed them here: gender equality, gender equity, gender justice. These terms all have subtle differences, but they all share the same goal: improving our workplaces, our communities, and our country, with the aim of giving women and gender diverse people equal opportunity to reach their potential. You may also hear us talk about intersectionality, which is an idea that recognizes that the barriers to gender equality vary according to other aspects of a woman's identity, including age, race, sexual orientation, ethnicity, class, religion. Intersectionality really strives to address this by thinking about that full spectrum of women's issues. You're also going to hear the term racialized today, and that's a word that really helps us understand the process by which societies construct races as real, different, and unequal, and the fact that racial barriers are rooted in social prejudices, and they're not about individual or community shortcomings. So those are just some of the words you might hear today. You might hear others, and there might be questions that you have, and don't be shy. Please type your question in the chat or in our Q&A. We've got lots of behind-the-scene experts who are here to respond, and we're all here to learn. There really are no wrong questions. So I'm going to make sure the chat is working by giving away our first prize, which is a deluxe gift basket from one of our partners and panelists, The Body Shop. Everyone is ready. I'm going to ask a question, and the first person who types it right in the chat will win. I hope everyone's ready. Okay, so here's the first question. What percentage less will a racialized woman working full-time, full year earn on average compared to a non-racialized man? So we've got Jeff saying 40%, 20%. Oh my goodness, we were getting really close. The answer is 33. Look at how fast everyone's coming in. The answer is 33%. And you'll actually get an email. The person who got closest to 33%, the fastest, will get an email from me arranging your gift basket. And I'm glad to see that everyone is aware of that gap and also is really able to use the chat. So it's now my pleasure to introduce a gifted and purpose-driven leader who I've had the pleasure of working with every day. Paulette Sr., the President and CEO of the Canadian Women's Foundation. Welcome, Paulette.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you. What an exciting day we're having. I am so thrilled to be here. It's not every day that we get to celebrate International Women's Day, so I'm thrilled, and I hope everyone is also equally excited. So as Suzanne introduced, my name is Paulette Sr. I'm the President and CEO of the Canadian Women's Foundation. Thank you all for coming, and a warm thank you to our amazing partners for supporting us today. The Canadian Women's Foundation is a member of In Good Company, a collective of organizations which also includes Panelists, Plan International Canada, and YWCA Canada. It's funded by the RBC Foundation, and In Good Company advances gender equality in the corporate sector and beyond. So the question of what it takes to build a gender equal corporate Canada is what In Good Company strives to answer. And the answer is multifaceted, as you can imagine. I had a conversation recently with Vandana Juneja, and Vandana is the Executive Director of Panelists Canada, to chat about this, and I invite you to watch this video along with us. We are 2 of 4 partners in this incredible, unique partnership called In Good Company. And it's been a pleasure working with you and your team over the past couple of years as we, work together to address the issues that we're working on, trying to make sure that issues around gender equality and equity are addressed in society at large. And specifically today, it's really about, the corporate partnerships that we've been able to work within.
I think, we've mentioned the checklist that we've created together, and there are so many key themes in that checklist that are applicable to today's working world. In particular, if you think about this last year with the global pandemic, the need for flexibility has really been key. When you think about the need for so many individuals to be pivoting just a year ago today, really to working from home. So being set up with the right tools and the support system and infrastructure necessary to do that, that's been really critical. But also looking at flexibility in a broader sense when you think about individuals and their need for different environments at home, their need for greater childcare. Mm-hmm. We're seeing so many parents, at home trying to manage work as well as virtual schooling, and having also a greater burden of caregiving on themselves in the home environment. And whether that's childcare or elder care or otherwise, there really has been a disproportionate impact on women in light of COVID-19 over the past year. So that need for flexibility has been key.
I think it was RBC who released results from a study recently that talked about the impact on women in particular when it came to the pandemic, the negative impact on women, and how many women are having to choose between continuing to work during a pandemic and managing everything else in their lives, including not being able to have access to childcare, which is a critical thing. And so to me, childcare has always been an important rung, even before the pandemic, a critical rung to achieving gender equality.
Women in senior level positions are also experiencing what's referred to as the emotional burden within the organization, whether or not they are working parents as well, but they're finding that more of the perhaps difficult or courageous conversations that are needed in the workplace with their teams as well, these are falling more so to women as well. And then from the perspective of the checklist, this focus on rooting out bias is also really critical. And I think this is ongoing, whether it be over the last year or prior to that as well. Catalyst has been doing a lot of work in this area over the years with respect to finding ways to mitigate or interrupt bias in the workplace, and then also to become more inclusive as leaders. So this can come out in very tactical ways, such as ensuring that job listings are provided in a way that is welcoming and open to diverse candidates, and so that they're given proper access to those listings. Also requiring a diverse slate when we're hiring for certain roles, particularly within leadership, so that there's a process in place. So if individuals don't actually secure a role through that diverse candidate slate, there's also the ability for them to understand, what may they do differently the next time around so that they could be successful. And really having clear and transparent criteria with respect to hiring and promotion and succession planning as well.
I think I would include the importance of setting policies within the organization. So how that works is that it sets a tone from the top in terms of what is the expectation, but also what are we working towards. So if the policy is that it's important to have a workforce that is made up of the diversity of the community that it serves or that it exists within, then that's important. So, setting a policy around embracing that diversity and what that looks like, and therefore that policy sets the tone for making sure that when you're hiring, that you're putting a number of things in place around how you go about that hiring, but also when you have folks in place, it also helps in terms of how you will retain them. One of the topics that I don't think gets talked about a lot is diversity in leadership. And today in this conversation, we both happen to be BIPOC, racialized women. I'm a Black Canadian woman. You are South Asian. And unfortunately, we are a rarity as we're both heading up important institutions in Canada.
You have to see it to be it. And the fact that representation does matter in leadership in organizations. And so, when you think about it, as you're moving up the pipeline of an organization, if you can see others who are like yourself and who serve as role models for you and who you can aspire to, I do believe that, we know from the research as well that helps people to be able to advance and to see themselves in those roles and to aspire to them as well. We need to hold leadership accountable for their role in being part of the solution in creating greater equity in senior leadership positions. We've done research on this topic of the emotional tax, which we know exists for people of color in Canadian workplaces. And that shows up in different ways, including an impact on wellness, such as sleep patterns or ability to sleep, and also in factors such as the intent to stay with the organization. And in fact, when people are experiencing this emotional tax, they are constantly on guard with respect to potential bias.
I feel like I have paid more than my share. I'll say that much. And I don't think that it gets any easier no matter how long I've been around. Maybe it rolls off my shoulders a little easier. But that aspect of it matters, and it impacts not just my mental health or the mental health of other women like us in leadership roles who are so rare, but it impacts my physical health. Yet, what I have to balance that with is knowing how important it is for especially younger women, for all kinds of diverse folks, gender diverse folks who are not in these leadership roles, to see us and to see that we are managing and doing well. And while I think that's important, that's an added layer of burden that others don't carry.
Over this past year, of course, there has been so much heightened focus on racial inequity in the workplace. I think it's a positive step because we're actually having conversations that are meaningful and important. But, the skin doesn't go away. The skin doesn't change. And this is an experience that people of color have day in and day out. And it's not sort of a phase that we're going through. So this conversation really does need to continue. And I think what you're pointing to is also there's a great deal of self-managing that's going on.
Because we have to manage ourselves well, and that's the pressure of it all. But I do want to just say that despite all of that, it's been a learning journey for me in terms of leadership role. I'm sure it has been for you as well. I have really good supports around me, and that's important in terms of sustaining me while I'm managing through this. And it's important that we are keeping the fires burning when it comes to women's leadership, when it comes to equity in the workplace, when it comes to making sure that workplaces are representative of the communities that they're in. And I'm just so thankful to you for this conversation today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And as we work together to really change the world by changing workplaces, by changing policies, by ensuring that we can root out bias and that we can have places where everyone is welcome, no matter who they are. Well, I just want to thank all the people in the background that work the magic that actually, help us to get all this done. And thanks so much to Vandana at Catalyst for this video. And now, my pleasure to pass it back to you, Suzanne.
I'm going to jump in, and Suzanne, maybe you can do a little bit of jump on, jump off, and see if we can get it going again. I just want to thank you for your patience with that. You know how sometimes the tech gods are not with us. So actually, we wanted to jump into a panel. We have some great panelists with us. And we just had wanted to do a trivia, but I'm going to put the trivia aside, and I'm just actually going to jump into our panelists. We actually wanted to introduce Valerie Chort, VP Corporate Citizenship of Sustainability and Executive Director of RBC Foundation. We also have Thomas Davies, CEO of Abliminal, and Karen Campbell. She's a manager of community initiatives at the Canadian Women's Foundation. So this panel is very much about creating organizational conditions for gender equity. It's really around the idea of top-down change or the change that really benefits us all. And it's more about processes and practices and making just the right organization situation so that equity can happen. So I'm going to start actually with Valerie. Hi, Valerie. Thanks for being with us today. RBC is just one of the largest companies in Canada right now, and you've been taking a leadership role in the push towards gender equality and equity. Tell us a bit about what's on your mind today as you're seeing the impact of the pandemic on women.
Well, first, I'd like to wish everybody a happy International Women's Day. It's great to have this panel and to take a moment in time and think about things in this way. As I reflected on, and I have a 20-year-old daughter, you always think about it in a bit of a different context. I must say, not only through work, but also through your personal lives and people that you mentor. So I think about it really in two ways. The first is thinking about the importance of continued progress, but secondly, around the urgency. And so in addition to continued progress, there is really, as we've heard before, a need for urgency caused by the pandemic. And so if I think about the role that we can play with respect to RBC, we can play it in two ways. Number one, just making sure that what we do is driving progress, but also thinking about our role in society in terms of being an influencer in that respect. So I'll talk a little bit about the two. So, as you mentioned, Andrea, the role of advancement in women and diverse talent is core to our strategy. It's just a top and important business strategy for RBC. Women lead a number of critical roles across our senior ranks, representing close to 46% of our executive levels, including for 2020, 51% of new hires and 52% of promotions, which is something that we're focusing on. And it's something that's been recognized by Catalyst as well. But with respect to influence, I think it's a couple of ways. So, the influence that we had in bringing together the 4 leading Canadian women organizations around this topic in good company is a way to lean in and say, like, we could actually learn from each other in different ways if we collaborated in something like in good company. But we also can influence through things like our RBC economics. So we made a distinctive goal to really look at through the lens of RBC economics, what does this issue mean to women and to Canadian society and to prosperity? So as you mentioned, a couple of key points that I worry about is that, almost 500,000 Canadian women lost their jobs during the pandemic. And more than 200,000 are now slipping into the ranks of long-term unemployment, which is a 3-fold increase year over year. At the same time, 100,000 women aged 20 plus have exited the labor force entirely, compared to fewer than 10,000 men. So 100,000 to 10,000. And beyond just this age group, overall, women have paid a heavier price than men in terms of employment during the pandemic. It also, as you identified, it shares some specific disproportionality negative impacts that the pandemic has had with respect to lower income women identified as visible minorities. Interestingly, it's not any different in the US. The report really identified recent job numbers telling a similar story, with 2.4 million women in the US exiting the workforce compared to less than 1.8 million men. So I think these trends really just are worrisome. And as a reminder that the work in front of us is to create a more inclusive economy and society for ourselves in that regard. So I think about progress, but I think about the urgency.
Thank you, Valerie. Suzanne, we're going to get you back in here to lead the rest.
Sounds
Hopefully
good.
it's going to work.
Can everyone hear me okay? Oh, phew. Wonderful. Thank you, Valerie. And thank you so much for telling us a little bit about the kinds of influence that you at RBC can have. And I agree with you, the urgency could not be more. Karen and Thomas, I know both of you both have some insights on a particular sector, on the sector of technology, and some of the challenges that are facing women who want to enter this field, either as new graduates or as women who are retraining. Thomas, could you tell us a little bit about some of your insights?
Absolutely, Suzanne, thank you. So as you're probably aware, cybersecurity is called out oftentimes as having a massive skill gap, and it's one I think could be a great opportunity women and to help through this gender equality conversation. The challenges we face so far is what I've heard and seen is it's not a comfortable space due to the existing lack of diversity within the profession. There's been a very standard type of hire that's been focused on for many, many years, really a deep IT technical background that has not been appealing for women in STEM for a long time. And our profession is somewhat shrouded in ambiguity and secrecy. So I think, we really need to be more open to hiring based on interest and passion for the role. Because in my opinion, we can train the rest of the skills. We need to be open to hires from non-IT disciplines because it'll really bring a different view that will help really accelerate our profession. And there needs to be more awareness about the opportunities that exist within the cyber career. So we really need to share what's so great about our profession and why it could be such a great opportunity for women.
Great, Thomas. Karen, do you want to just talk a little bit about what you've seen?
Sure. I think Thomas raises some really important points about how to diversify the sector. I think, many studies have been done about the importance of diversity in the tech sector. And a lot of tech firms like Tom's firm, Abliminal, they've taken this on and they've, implemented diversity and inclusion initiatives. But just, to build on Valerie's point about what's happening now, what we see in the tech sector is in so many others during the pandemic, women are more likely to be laid off or furloughed than their male colleagues at this time, largely because many of them are still holding entry level or junior positions in these companies. So they're sort of the first to go. And so many of them are more likely to be managing childcare responsibilities during lockdowns. And that further complicates their sort of upward trajectory in these firms. So some of the programs that the Canadian Women's Foundation funds are designed to train women and gender diverse people to work in the tech sector. And these programs particularly focus on communities that are marginalized in Canada. So Black, Indigenous, and women of color, women with disabilities, women living on low incomes with lower levels of education, and many also with women who have recently come to Canada and whose first language isn't English or French. So added barriers, intersecting barriers there that these folks are facing. I think that as a result, the programs that we fund to provide this kind of training to get into the tech sector end up having this dual focus. They spend a lot of time on the skills training elements to prepare people to work in these sectors. But then they also spend probably an equal amount of time working on what we would call soft skills. And that might seem like a kind of benign term in the context of a careers course. But for the women and gender diverse folks in these programs, the soft skills conversation is often one that's really difficult and frank about how to move from the safe space of the community organization sort of inclusive and feminist training program into a workplace that might not have created that culture of inclusion or is on their journey to doing that and hasn't gotten there yet. I was speaking with the lead of one of the programs that we fund, and she talked about making sure that the immigrant women who are in their programs know the names of the local sports teams so that they could follow sort of water cooler type conversations and banter at the workplace. And this was actually a direct suggestion that came to them from a woman who they had placed in a workplace. And she was just struggling so much to relate to her colleagues and to be able to participate in the social elements of the workplace. For sure, sports team banter is not part of the training that most of her colleagues had to undertake to get their job. But it's really the reality and what's relevant when you're preparing to work in a white male-dominated industry if you're not white and or male. It's similar to what Paulette and Vandana were talking about in that what did they call it? An added layer of burden that others don't carry, that they have to carry with them. And I think it raises important questions for women and gender diverse people who are training for careers in the tech sector. To what extent are they willing or able to change themselves to fit the box? Or to what extent are they willing or able to try to be the catalyst for change within that workplace culture? And in that framing, a lot of the burden of responsibility is on their shoulders. And it's really important, I think, that we shift that burden back to the employers in the sector and say, you really need to understand this. And I think there are lots of good efforts in that respect, but there's still a long way to go.
Thank you, Karen. Thomas, I just want to ask how that resonates with you. I know we've talked a lot about how you've been trying to build an intentional culture as you're growing from a fairly new position. What are some of the strategies that you've used to adapt your own workplace?
Yeah, so I think, Karen brings up some great points around really being intentional and consistent in your approach and really asking for everyone's voice. And you have to listen and you have to hear, and those are two different things. And out of that, you need to adjust. So even listening to Karen, I'm thinking now about the water cooler speech when we're, back at the water cooler. I think if we're consistently doing the right things, we'll also appeal to the best talent. We recently had a job posting with a large number of applicants, and we got through the process. We made an offer, and I said, you've been a great candidate. How did you find out about us? And they said, well, it was actually all of the posts around International Women's Day and the Canadian Women's Foundation that led me to Abliminal. And I thought that, of course, if you do the right thing, you'll attract the best talent. And the best teams are going to be made up of those who are diverse in thought and can really challenge and augment one another. And we have to give everyone that ability, that empowerment to really challenge the conversation, think outside the box, and make us better all the time.
That's great. Karen, I know you've got some ideas about some specific toolkits and some things that folks might have in their downloadable toolkit that could be useful for this.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that whole question of moving away from asking people to change themselves to fit the culture and getting the culture to change, that's part of what was being spoken about before with the In Good Company initiative that's supported by Valerie and her team at the RBC Foundation. And that's bringing together our partners in the sector to really look at how to support businesses in having those conversations about gender equity in their workplace. We have created a downloadable checklist for businesses to sort of assess the strength of their gender inclusion work, and that can be a good starting point. You can find it on the In Good Company website. It's igcompany.ca. I think honestly, the employers who are most successful in their diversity and inclusion efforts, they tend to do a better job of understanding the different stressors that their non-white and non-male employees are experiencing. And they work to create welcoming environments and spaces that support their employees in bringing their authentic selves to work. And I think that diverse employees who are working in these kinds of workplaces are better able to contribute in more meaningful ways. And that benefits them as people, and it benefits their workplaces. So, I mean, it's a good situation all around when that can happen. And I think there's lots of different things that could be done. So checking out that checklist might be a good place to start.
Thank you, Karen. And I think the idea that it benefits all of us is really important. And Valerie, you mentioned at the top of the panel that it's critical for organizations to transform now for the benefit of all of Canada. And Valerie, I'm wondering what you think, what happens if we don't get better at this? What happens? What are these consequences?
I just wanted to address the 2 points that were made earlier. So it reminds me, because things don't change. When I was in consulting and I had to go out and network, I had to then, pick up the, figure out what sports team was doing what in what area, because I just don't follow sports. So, I had to kind of just get up to speed in terms of what was going on in that respect. So it's pretty interesting how sometimes things just stay the same. One thing I would also add is that, we hire a lot of team members in the area of technology and cyber and so forth. And we actually found that the way that the job description is written makes a difference. That if you write the job description in a way that actually describes, what will this do in terms of not only the greater good, but how does it drive something bigger? A whole lot more women would respond to the ad than men. So, not always also look to see if you're going to attract the best talent, how are you shaping that job description? And are there some things that you could do differently, or even just do a bit of a testing? It's pretty fascinating. So back to your question, Suzanne, I think in some cases, when I look back at the impact, COVID-19 rolled back the clock on 3 decades of advancement in women labor force participation, 3 decades, setting not only, I mean, that's bad enough, but it's also going to impact the speed and the scale of a recovery. So we have to just think about that again in terms of economic impact to Canada. Before the crisis, women held a variety of jobs, as we all know, but there was a common thread, as many worked for modest pay, low-skilled service jobs that helped keep the broader Canadian economy humming along. And because they overrepresented the majority of those industries most affected by virus containment measures, they bore the brunt of the job losses. And the areas that I worry about in particular are women and young women and mothers, 2 categories that have fared the worst. Just by way of example, Gen Z women make up 2.5% of the Canadian labor force, but account for 17% of the decline during the pandemic. And so, the longer these women are out of the labor force, the greater the risk of skill erosion, as we talked about, which could impact rehiring and also transitioning to other roles. Just when, like Karen was saying, they were just starting on their career, and then all of a sudden, if you're out of that too long, people become, worry about the transferability of those skills. So, I think in terms of, looking forward, it's training, and upskilling that are critical to an inclusive recovery, but also affordable childcare, and also recognition of the critical importance of, caregiving, healthcare worker roles, policies to protect and also increased dollars, hourly wages on that would be things that are top of mind for sure.
Thank you, Valerie. And I want to thank all of you for sharing your insights today. I'm sure all 3 of you will agree that this could have been a much longer conversation. And to everyone watching, know that we know that this conversation needs to go deeper. So we're going to put up 2 anonymous polls right now that we would love your feedback on. And the idea behind these polls is that your content and your poll answers will help us shape the next conversations that we're doing. Andrew, I'm going to ask you to put up the polls. And then after those polls, we're going to just do one more trivia before we get into the next panel. So our 2 questions on the poll today is rate where you think your team or organization is on the scale of development for creating the conditions of gender equity. And then the second question is pick the most important area that you think needs to be developed today to push your team or organization further along on this scale. So please take a second to fill in these polls. As I said, it's going to help us shape the kind of content that we produce as a foundation to make sure that everyone is getting the right kind of information that they need at this time. So as you're answering that poll, I do want to also just take a moment to do one more prize pack. We have a wonderful winter solstice jewelry set from our partner and panelists, Hillberg and Berk. You're going to hear from them in a moment. Again, I'm going to ask everyone to put I'm going to ask a question, and the first person who types the right answer into the chat will win. Andrea is just putting up the question now. Here's the question. What was the first year that a Canadian woman could open her own bank account without obtaining permission from her husband, father, brother, or other male relative? Okay, we've got lots of answers coming in. I saw the right one pop up. That year is 1964, less than 60 years ago, which really gives me pause every day. And I can tell you that simple act of getting your bank accounts was required an enormous movement of women, of communities, and of business to make it happen. Positive change towards gender equality can only happen when we work together along those shared goals. And on that note, I want to pass it back over to Paulette Senior, who's going to talk a little bit with a panelist around purpose, around what it takes to really make change. So Paulette, welcome.
Thanks, Suzanne. I'm loving the musical chairs we're playing today. This is great. So now we're going to talk about the power of employees and leaders to act as champions of equity. the right leadership, policies, and practices can all be in place, but there's not a healthy, growing culture of corporate citizenship to match. So without that, you won't get very far. A groundswell effect is what we want, and it doesn't happen automatically. You have to actually nurture and grow it in our workplaces. So join me in welcoming the next set of panelists, Hilary Lloyd, who's from The Body Shop, Canada, one of my favorite places to shop. Rachel Mielke, I'm sorry that I messed up your name, Mielke, CEO of Hillberg and Berk, who actually, they have the best jewelry, I'm just saying. I got some samples the other day, beautiful, thank you. And Sally Dimachki, who is a colleague, manager, investment readiness program here at the Canadian Women's Foundation. So welcome everyone, great to have you, happy International Women's Day. And then I'm just gonna move right into the questions if that's okay with you. So I want to talk about women-led businesses. Rachel, you are an entrepreneur, and Sally, you work closely with women entrepreneurs in your work with the Canadian Women's Foundation. So Sally, let's start with you. What can you share with us? What are some of the unique challenges that women entrepreneurs face, and what are some of their strengths that you've noted?
Absolutely. So as many of you know, globally, women-led ventures are still represent a really small portion of business ventures. And while there's plenty of evidence to show that teams that are more diverse from an intersectional perspective, so looking at gender, race, educational background, age, and many other components of our identities do lead to stronger business outcomes, we're really still advancing really slowly. And we're seeing that through the work that we're doing. So why is that happening? And there was really interesting research done and highlighted by the World Economic Forum, looking at how accelerators were helping women-led businesses, but they ended up helping them raise more debt and not really more equity, which ends up widening the gender gap. So we actually see this through our work with the entrepreneurs that we support and the women-led ventures. Many are more comfortable accessing debt, but it's also because they feel like equity is out of their reach and they're very intimidated by it. And so we can invest in resources for women-led ventures, but what we really need to talk about as well is the many misconceptions we have when it comes to women-led ventures. So in the case of investors, they have a really strong bias in investing in what they perceive as more of a traditional team, which is usually men-led, and assess the risk as well more traditionally. So they tend to perceive women-led ventures as more risky, especially when they're purpose-driven. Even if on papers, they might look the exact same as a men-led venture and have very strong model and business case. So what can we really do? We are really looking at reviewing and changing how we perceive and evaluate risk. How are we assessing the strengths of a business? What are the biases in decision-making, and how we assess the potential and success of these ventures? And what representation do we have in making in these decisions? We, as a Women's Foundation, the businesses that we have funded, sometimes it's the first time someone has believed in them. So with these misconceptions, not only are we missing out on many untapped business opportunities, but in the case of social purpose-driven ventures, we're also missing out on the chance to join forces and foster those businesses that have a really strong impact on our communities, just because we don't see them as fitting our traditional view of the business. So Rachel, you have firsthand experience really building purpose into your business. Would love to hear more how you have done this through your work.
Well, I would say the first thing is that it has to be something that's like authentic, because adding a purpose layer into your business adds another layer of something you were trying to achieve overall. Now, that being said, I think that is a competitive advantage, because it attracts people to your business. It makes people passionate about working for you. It makes people, your customers, passionate about supporting you. So although it can be challenging to, in the beginning, figure out how do you not only start and scale a business, which on its own can be incredibly challenging, but how do you also achieve a greater good through your business? But I also see that as one of the biggest opportunities of going into business is you can do more than just, create profits. You can create change, and that change might be small in your local community, as it was when Hillberg and Berk first got started. And now that we are more of a national brand, we can affect change through our incredible partnership with the Canadian Women's Foundation. So I really think that there is this incredible opportunity. Sally, it was a bit disheartening to hear the statistic of traditional investment looks at purpose-driven businesses as more risky. I didn't know that. That's disheartening, because we know that purpose-driven business not only is good business, but it makes incredible impact. And then I think that through the challenges of the pandemic, we have this opportunity to rewrite how we invest, how we run our companies, and we see more than ever, everyone has had to have experience of, how do I navigate all of this when I have the challenges of my small children at home that I'm also having to care for and educate, while doing all of the other things that we have in our lives. We have this chance to step back and rewrite how we do everything. And now is the time to do that. So although I think we're just stepping into this era of people realizing how incredibly important purpose-run businesses are, now is the time to lean into supporting them more than ever, and organizationally to think about how do we change the way that we recruit and the way that we bring people up within our organization, the way that we grow to be more inclusive, and to ensure that we are writing purpose into the overall strategy, because it's more than just good for the world, it's good for business too.
That is so fascinating, Rachel. And I messed up your last name. So for the record, could you just correct me, and then we can move on?
It's Mielke.
Mielke,
but
thank you.
You did great, Paulette.
Okay, great. So thank you for giving everyone watching this a bit of a roadmap, and for the inspiration and energy that you bring to it. So now, Hilary, the Body Shop has found real purpose in championing social justice, social and gender justice, in fact. So why did you choose this focus, and how have you empowered your employees to be part of this?
Thanks, Paulette. I wanted to start just by saying something that's quite interesting, and that it might be a good example that the Body Shop was founded in 1976. It is a woman-founded business, and it was founded with purpose in mind. So if there was really a good case example that goes back in time, the Body Shop might be a good one. So perhaps not such a risky investment. Just thought I'd share that. But of course, I mentioned that the Body Shop's a woman-founded business. Our founder, her name is Anita Roddick. And like I said, she founded the business with feminist principles specifically, and she championed the idea that business should be a force for good. So certainly our focus on social and gender justice comes from our founding principles. She specifically pioneered a business model that was designed to create positive impact for people in communities, and she used human connections. So specifically, connections through our people. People can be employees in communities as a guiding principle. So of course, her vision is a constant source of inspiration for us, and that's really the Body Shop starting point. So when we look at sort of our specific focus on gender justice and empowering employees, again, we've taken Anita's vision and we've defined our purpose to fight for a fairer, more beautiful world. And activism and advocacy is a part of our DNA. We define ourselves as an activist business and an activist brand. In fact, our new retail locations, our new retail concept is even called an activist workshop. So imagine an employee in an environment where their workplace is designed for the purposes of both selling but advocacy. So it's a really, really sort of exciting and encouraging concept. I mentioned our employees. They see themselves as empowered justice seekers. Sort of their role is to support their communities. And in so supporting their communities, they actually support their business. So there's this really excellent reciprocal relationship that's essential. By outreaching into our communities and chasing sort of social change or gender justice change in communities, we're building advocates for the business and the brand. So this collective effort can be really, really impactful. I wanted to talk really specifically about a program that we've just launched. Most recently, we've developed what we're calling a community-led or grassroots activism program for our retail employees. It's designed with gender justice in mind. It's really sort of, its origins come from community organizing. It's designed to be from the bottom up. So we've applied a gender justice lens. And then what we're doing is we're enabling our sort of employee collective to champion gender justice initiatives in their communities so that we can have real focused impact. We're really, really, really excited about the program. We've actually, it's worth saying, launched the program with loads of support from the Canadian Women's Foundation in particular, leveraging the foundation's tools, training, and networking. So we're very appreciative and very grateful for that. The last point I'll say is that, of course, the goal is to drive engagement across our employee base. As part of that activist culture that we have, we want to enable our teams with tools for community organizing and outreach. And what's really interesting on a practical level, we are almost taking a train the trainer approach. Again, really being mindful of bottom up. So we're sort of enabling sort of a network of retail ambassadors to help support our store teams and our store managers reach out in their communities and learn through their activism so that we can kind of create a collective impact.
Wow, that's just simply amazing. And thanks for reminding us of the roots of Body Shop, because sometimes I know I've forgotten, but you know, that makes it even more purposeful for me to go and shop even more. So thank you, because you know, I think we're living in a time where people actually want to know their money is actually going to a conscious raising and corporation and business that really thinks about what they're doing on the planet. So amazing. So we know that employees are a huge part of creating change. And before we wrap up, I thought perhaps you can each give us a quick tip about how employees and entrepreneurs can be engaged as champions and leaders in their communities. And I think you started talking about this, Hilary, but let's start with Sally and see what are some of the, or what, give us at least one quick tip that you can think about in this way.
Absolutely. My quick tip is actually from many of the ventures we're supporting right now. They are building financial literacy into their business and supporting the women that they work with and also in their network. You know, many of you might know that women in Canada retire with less money than men, and they're at higher risk of living in poverty once they retire. And this gap happens for many different reasons. But what happens with building financial literacy opportunities into your internal work is that it will not only help the women in your network and the wage gap, but it can also help men in your organization or company or network better understand why there is that gap and how to be better allies to tackle it.
Thank you. And Rachel?
Yeah, I'll maybe focus on the entrepreneurship side. Having scaled my business over the last 15 years and now, you know, having lived that and being passionate about the impact business can have in the community, I want to work with the next generation of up and coming entrepreneurs to see that it is possible to focus on both purpose and have a purpose impact through your company and be profitable and grow and scale while doing that. So something that I've focused on over the last year and a half is working within Saskatchewan, where Hillberg and Berk was born out of, with women entrepreneurs of Saskatchewan to create a charter that we are looking for support across all levels of organizations and government to sign on, to commit, to say we will be a part of closing that gender entrepreneurship gap. And part of that is through mentorship, part of it is through procurement practices, but it's really about inspiring organizations and government to step back and just take a look internally and ask the question, what can we do to better support closing that gender entrepreneurship gap? And also, it is important, you can't be what you don't see. And so I think just talking and showing you can be profitable, you can scale, and you can have a strong purpose that is an integral part of your organization is really important. Just sharing those stories of organizations that have done it is really important.
Thank you. Hilary?
Okay, I'll focus on the employee engagement piece, and I really think it's three things. The first is, of course, equipping the teams or sort of your employee base or yourself, frankly, with the tools, resources, time, and training. Time is important, necessary to make the change. The second, and in particular important for the Body Shop, is that we need to understand that there are different levels of engagement and advocacy or activism as we define it. So we need to provide space for individuals to grow in their activism journeys. And the last piece is, of course, take advice and be willing to learn along the way. It certainly is a feedback loop. And if it is about sort of, grassroots or sort of some employee learning to drive and great engagement, you have to, of course, listen to the teams and take their advice. So that's my 2 cents worth.
That's how you got 3 tips in one. Thank you. That's wonderful. So, there you have it. I hope you've all taken some quick notes. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. You gave us all so much to think about. As Andrea and Suzanne mentioned, this is just the beginning of the conversation. So I hope you will all join us as we delve deeper into corporate citizenship for gender equality in the months to come. Over to you, Suzanne.
Thank you. Hello again. Before we say goodbye, we have a couple of important pieces of business to take care of. The first are the results from the poll that will help us shape upcoming conversations. So you can see we're going to need to dig in a little bit more on how we can create those conditions. We've got lots of folks coming in at intermediate, so there's still some work to do. And then when we're thinking about important areas, it really looks like leadership is standing out. So that's definitely another conversation that we will be bringing back to you in the weeks and months to come. I also have a second important piece of business, which is our grand prize. Thanks to RBC and Catalyst, we have a workshop, a workplace workshop that's valued at $6,500. There's 6 workshops you can choose from, and this prize is going to help any workplace accelerate their inclusion and diversity efforts. Like last time, I'm going to ask a question, and the first person who types the right answer in the chat will win this amazing prize. I hope everyone is ready. Andrea, if you can put up the question. Who said, until all of us have made it, none of us have made it? We're getting lots of good guesses. I'm gonna, we got the right question. We got the right answer. This is Rosemary Brown said this. And for those of you who don't know, Rosemary Brown was the first Black Canadian woman to be elected to the Canadian Provincial Legislature. And super importantly, she is a founding mother of the Canadian Women's Foundation. And her words guide us every day. If you found today's conversation useful and inspiring, I would ask you to consider making a gift to support the Canadian Women's Foundation. Every year, we support thousands of women, girls, and gender diverse people as they move out of violence, out of poverty, and into confidence and leadership. We need supporters now more than ever as we tackle the gendered impacts of the pandemic. We will also be sending out a survey, and I ask that you take a few moments to fill it out so that we can create future events that will meet your interests and needs. I want to say thank you to our panelists for sharing their time with us today. Thank you to our sponsors, Abliminal and EY. And just a note for the Abliminal partners, please use the Zoom link that was sent to you in order to continue the conversation in just a few moments. And finally, my deepest, most heartfelt thanks to everyone here who took the time to join us today. I hope you found the conversation useful, and I hope you will walk alongside us as exceptional corporate citizens for gender equality. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your International Women's Day.